Yeah, thanks again, everyone, for having me to join you. It's a real privilege and an honor to get to share God's Word with you all. Let me pray quickly before I get into this. Heavenly Father, I pray that the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts would be good and pleasing to you. Please, by your Spirit and your Word, now transform our hearts to give you the glory that you deserve. We pray this in your Son's name. When life is going well, it's easy for us to claim to believe in many things. We say that we believe in God and the gospel and in the power of forgiveness and in the resurrection from the dead. But then when life gets difficult, when our expectations are shaken, when the things that we are hoping in seem to be in tatters, when we stand on the brink of death, it's in those times that it becomes clear what we actually believe in and what we fear and trust in. The story from today's scripture that we're going to be going through today is in that kind of time. Prior to this time, things had been going well for the people of Egypt. Their economy had been booming, their agriculture and their science and their industry, all the different parts of their economy had been flourishing. Their national leaders had secured their borders, their military was well manned and fully funded. And so it was easy when life was going well for the Egyptians for them to claim to believe in many things. They said that they believed in their gods like Horus and Ra and Amun-Re. They believed in many different priests and temples, in magicians and incantations. But then when life got difficult for Egypt, when the Lord, the God of Israel, struck it with 10 plagues, when their economy was shaken, when their assumptions were shattered, when they not only stood on the brink of death, but many of them plunged into it. When life got difficult for the Egyptians, it became clear what they actually believed and trusted in. And it wasn't their gods like Horus and Ra and Amun-Re. It wasn't their priests or their magicians. What the Egyptians actually trusted in, what they feared and turned to in this dire moment, was their military, their chariots and their horsemen and their archers. Their other gods couldn't stand up against the God of Israel, but they still had hopes that their military could. And so they sent out their chariots to recover their former slaves that the Lord had set free. And that's where we pick up the story. The Lord has just freed the Israelites from slavery to Egypt by striking them with 10 plagues. And the Israelites are on the road out of slavery when they receive the strange request from the Lord, which we just read. I'll read it again for us. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Tell the people of Israel to turn back and encamp in Pi-Hahiroth between Migdol and the sea, in front of Baal-Zephon. You shall encamp it, facing by the sea. For Pharaoh will say of the people of Israel, 'They are wandering in the land. The wilderness has shut them in. And I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will pursue them. And I will get glory over Pharaoh and all his host, and the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord.'" Go corner yourself. That's essentially what the Lord tells the Israelites to do in this story. Go corner yourself. Instead of directing them how to get farther away from the Egyptians, it seems like he's cornering them by the sea, where there are no ways to escape and no exits. Meanwhile, he said that he's going to make sure that the Egyptian army, the most lethal force on the face of the planet at that time, he was going to make sure that they pursued the Israelites. So already at this point, the Israelites may kind of glance at each other a little skeptically. Did you hear that? Yeah, that sounds risky, doesn't it? What do you think God is playing at? Some of us could get killed. Of course, the Lord has explained why he wants the Israelites to corner themselves, but it's kind of a cryptic or mysterious explanation. He says that he wants to get glory or honor over Pharaoh. Now, Moses and the Israelites, they had seen the Lord get glory over Pharaoh by striking them with the 10 plagues, with hail and locusts and the angel of death. So maybe in their minds they picture what the Lord is saying is that he's going to destroy the Egyptian forces before they even get close. Maybe send down fire from heaven or the angel of death to just sweep through their camp. After all, since the Lord has freed the Israelites from slavery, life has been going well for the people of Israel. And so it's easy for them to say that they believe in the Lord, and the text says that they do what he commands them to do. They wait. But meanwhile, back in Egypt, the Lord is doing exactly what he says that he was going to do. Read in verses 5 to 8, we see this. It says, "When the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, the mind of Pharaoh and his servants was changed toward the people, and they said, 'What is this that we have done, that we have let Israel go from serving us?' So he made ready his chariot and took his army with him, and took 600 chosen chariots and all other chariots of Egypt with officers over all of them. And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, and he pursued the people of Israel, while the people of Israel were going out defiantly." At this time, the chariot was the most feared and powerful military technology known to mankind. So imagine you're one of these Israelites and you're just a foot soldier, and maybe you have like a wooden spear or maybe a pitchfork, and you've got this chariot which involves 2 fully grown war horses that are armored, and behind them they've got soldiers that are shooting arrows and spears, and it's charging right at you. It would be terrifying, wouldn't it? And there's not just a couple of these chariots coming. There's 600 of Pharaoh's best, and he's leading them. The battle line might have been a quarter of a mile long if you line those all up together. So it's a pretty terrifying picture. Except the Israelites aren't terrified yet, because they haven't seen their pursuers. They're still defiant, the text says. And I picture some of the Israelites turning to their friends at this point before they see the chariots, and maybe they're kind of joking like, "Hey, how many of the Egyptians do you think the Lord is going to kill today?" Maybe one points at a carcass of a dead animal on the road and says, "Hey, that's what the Egyptians are going to look like after the Lord gets done with them." And they laugh. But their laughter isn't going to last for long, because things aren't going to work out according to their expectations. Continuing in verse 9 to 12. "The Egyptians pursued them, all Pharaoh's horses and chariots and his horsemen and his army, and overtook them encamped at the sea by Pi-hahiroth in front of Baal-zephon. When Pharaoh drew near, the people of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians were marching after them, and they feared greatly. And the people of Israel cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, 'Is it because there are no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us in bringing us out of Egypt? Is not this what we said to you in Egypt? Leave us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians. For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness.' When life had been going well for the people of Israel, it had been easy for them to believe in the Lord. But the Lord hasn't sent fire from heaven to consume their pursuers, and the angel of death hasn't swept through the enemy camp. Instead, they've got a wall of horses charging straight at them. Of course, the Lord is just doing exactly what he said that he was going to do. But the Israelites, it seems like they're standing on the brink of death. And in that moment, in their fear, we see what the Israelites actually fear and trust in most. And it's not the Lord, the God who just saved them days earlier. And it's not even Moses, their leader. No, what the Israelites seem to be fearing the most and trusting in the most is what they're seeing with their own eyes. The Egyptian chariots and the horsemen and the military that's facing them. So the very same Israelites who just moments earlier might have been joking defiantly are now maybe shouting to each other, "Oh, it's a trap. What were we thinking? You're right. We're going to die." Think we can still surrender ourselves to the Egyptians? And we might be tempted to judge the Israelites at this point, but we should be careful about that, because we do similar things ourselves. When life gets difficult, when our expectations about how the Lord is going to deliver us are shattered, when we face some sort of death, when our church or our job or our relationships seem to be endangered, it becomes clear that we don't totally believe in the Lord as much as we say we do. What we fear and trust in more sometimes are the things that we can see with our own eyes. Maybe it's money, or maybe it's political power, or maybe it's physical force, or maybe it's our ability to work or to speak well. We doubt the Lord, and we turn to other powers and other forces that we think offer security that he can't. Now, when we come to these moments of doubt, it's helpful for us to have people remind us that the Lord can deliver us even when life gets difficult. And this is exactly what Moses does for the Israelites in verses 13 to 14. And Moses said to the people, "Fear not, and stand firm, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You have only to be silent." You see, Moses has already learned from personal experience to believe in the Lord even when life gets difficult. Moses, once in his youth, had expected the Lord to deliver the Israelites by his own hand. But the Lord hadn't cooperated with Moses' expectations. Instead, Moses' life had gotten more difficult. He had to go off into exile for a while. But now, finally, after 40 years of waiting, the Lord has delivered the Israelites. He's sent the 10 plagues and used Moses to do that. And so even though the Egyptian chariots are thundering towards them, even though Moses' fellow Israelites are doubting, Moses still believes that the Lord can deliver them from death. But in light of Moses' belief, the Lord's response in verses 15 to 18 is kind of surprising. The Lord said to Moses, "Why do you cry to me? Tell the people of Israel to go forward. Lift up your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it, that the people of Israel may go through on the sea on dry ground. And I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they shall go in after them. And I will get glory over Pharaoh and all his host, his chariots and his horsemen. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, when I have gotten glory over Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen." The Lord almost seems like he's rebuking Moses for crying out to him. He says, "Why do you cry out to me?" And perhaps it's because even though Moses knows that he should believe in the Lord even when things get difficult, he should know that the Lord will deliver them, he doesn't quite understand how it is that the Lord plans to deliver them. Maybe he's thinking to himself, "Okay, Lord, I believe you can deliver us even though things are difficult, so why don't you just kill these Egyptians and keep us safe before they kill us?" But the Lord doesn't plan to keep the Israelites safe. He does have plans to get glory over Pharaoh and his chariots, but he also has plans for the Israelites. He wants Moses to divide the sea with his staff and for the Israelites to enter into it. And Moses may be wondering if this is just too complicated. He may be asking himself, "Why, Lord? Isn't this just going to make our lives even more difficult? Couldn't some of us get killed in the process?" And I know I've had similar thoughts myself when the Lord wants to deliver me in a way that I don't understand. For example, when the Lord asks us to overcome opposition to the gospel, not by the means that we would normally use, not by our cleverness, not by returning insults for insults, not by force, not by money, but rather by humility, by blessing those who insult us, by praying for those who persecute us, by preaching the gospel graciously, even to those who aren't concerned. Sometimes the Lord's way of delivering us seems like it makes life more difficult, not less. In fact, sometimes the Lord, instead of seeming like he's bringing us from the brink of death, seems like he's almost plunging us further into it. And that may have been how the Israelites felt in verses 19 to 22. The angel of God, who was going before the host of Israel, moved and went behind them, and the pillar of cloud moved from before them and stood behind them, coming between the host of Egypt and the host of Israel. And there was cloud and darkness, and it lit up the night, without one coming near the other all night. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord drove the sea back by a strong east wind all night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. And the people of Israel went into the midst of the sea on dry ground, the waters being a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. So this massive tornado-looking thing, the pillar of cloud, it's probably several stories high. It might have like fire glowing inside of it or lightning of some sort. It gets between the Israelites and the Egyptians. And initially the Israelites are probably celebrating. Like, yes, okay, Lord, a little late, but it looks like you're finally going to kill our pursuers. But then the cloud doesn't automatically kill their pursuers. Instead, it just stands there. It does separate them, and it lets them know that the Lord is present with them. But then the sea opens up, and Moses tells them to go into the middle of the sea. And we hear this story a lot, so it's easy for us to take for granted. But back then, most people couldn't swim, and the sea was a very terrifying place. It was often associated with death and destruction, maybe the afterlife, forces of chaos. If you died at sea, people thought that you would be cursed forever. And so the Israelites, they may look at what Moses is telling them to do, and they may be thinking to themselves, are we sure that the Lord is planning on killing our pursuers? Or maybe he's going to kill us. Maybe the Lord is just going to take revenge on us for doubting him. Maybe his mercy on us has run out. And then things seem to get even worse. Verse 23. The Egyptians pursued and went in after them into the midst of the sea, all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen. Not only has the Lord commanded the Israelites to go into the midst of death itself, now he's letting the Egyptian chariots chase after them. So even if the Israelites have a few hours head start, the Egyptians are going to catch up soon. As they're fleeing in disarray across the seabed, the Egyptian chariots could just sweep in and slaughter them all. I imagine the Israelites shouting, we're dead, Lord have mercy. And it may seem to them like a foregone conclusion until we get to verses 24 to 29. And in the morning watch, the Lord in the pillar of fire and cloud looked down on the Egyptian forces and threw the Egyptian forces into a panic, clogging their chariot wheels so that they drove heavily. And the Egyptians said, let us flee from before Israel, for the Lord fights for them against the Egyptians. Then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand over the sea, that the waters may come back upon the Egyptians, upon their chariots, upon their horsemen. So Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to its normal course when the morning appeared. And as the Egyptians fled into it, the Lord threw the Egyptians into the midst of the sea. The waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen. Of all the host of Pharaoh that followed them into the sea, not one of them remained. But the people of Israel walked on dry ground through the sea, the waters being a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. One moment, the Egyptian charioteers may be shouting to each other, how many slaves do you think we're going to kill? The next moment, their chariot wheels get clogged and they shout, it's a trap, just before a wall of water plunges them into death. just at the moment when life had gotten most difficult for the Israelites, when their hope was in tatters, just as they seemed to not only be standing on the brink of death, but be plunging into it, the Lord delivered his people from the Egyptian military and from its technology, from Pharaoh and his chariots and his horsemen. What Egypt had most feared and trusted in, the Lord was able to sweep it away in a moment. Meanwhile, the Israelites emerged from the waters, shouting, "The Lord has delivered us from Egypt. And not just from Egypt, the Lord has delivered us from death." And we see the result of this in verses 30 to 31. "Thus the Lord saved Israel that day from the hand of the Egyptians. And Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. Israel saw the great power the Lord used against the Egyptians. So the people feared the Lord, and they believed in him and in his servant Moses." When life had gotten difficult, when they stood on the brink of death, the Israelites doubted the Lord. They had been no better than the Egyptians in some ways. I can almost imagine the Israelites standing on the brink of the sea, looking into the eyes of the Egyptian corpses and saying to themselves, "That could have been us. We doubted the Lord just like they did. We feared and trusted their chariots, and their horsemen were more powerful than the Lord. So why didn't the Lord take both us and the Egyptians? Why did the Lord have mercy on us?" Of course, maybe in a certain way, the Lord did kill both the Egyptians and the Israelites from a certain point of view. Obviously, the Egyptians are dead, but the Israelites were as good as dead, and now they've had to die to themselves spiritually. The Lord has brought them to this place where their lives are so difficult, where they're standing on the brink of death. He even kind of plunged them into it so that he could lead them through death, and so that we can believe that the Lord has the power and the mercy needed to deliver us from death. Of course, one question might have still been remaining for the Israelites, and that's the question we were just considering before. Why does the Lord have mercy on them? If his people in some ways were no better than the Egyptians, why did he deliver his people? Why didn't he kill both of them? Why does the Lord deliver his people from death? And the answer to that question wouldn't come for many years, for centuries. Not until Jesus, God's Son, the Israelite who did not doubt in the Lord when life got difficult, who did not fear or trust in other gods or worldly power or chariots or horsemen, who believed in the Lord even when he stood on the brink of death and was plunged into it. On the cross, Jesus was plunged into death on behalf of God's people. He was killed for our doubts and our failures to trust in the Lord, for our trust in other gods and other false powers. And the Lord delivered Jesus from death by his resurrection, so that we can believe that the Lord has the power and the mercy needed to deliver us from death as well if we trust in him. So now, if our lives get difficult, if we stand on the brink of some kind of death, if we face humiliation or persecution or loss or insults, we still believe that the Lord will deliver us. At first, he may actually lead us deeper into the sea. We may have to love those who hurt us and bless those who insult us. We may have to preach the gospel even to those that we fear. It may seem like the Lord is leading us into death, but we believe that if he does so, he will also lead us out of death. Because of what the Lord has done, we believe that he has the power and the mercy needed to deliver us from death. Let's pray. Father, we thank you that you have shown your power and your mercy in delivering the Israelites. And that same power and mercy is something that we can receive from you today. You've delivered each one of us who've trusted in you from death by your Son, Jesus. And we know that you will continue to deliver us from the different challenges and struggles and difficulties that we face in our everyday life. So help us to trust in you even when life gets difficult, even when it seems like we are standing on the brink of the sea. Let us not fear or abandon you, but rather let us trust that you have the power and mercy that we need. We pray all this in your Son's name.